They say when you return home after a long time, everything feels smaller. I wish that were true for me. It's been 12 years since I left Pine Hollow, a sleepy village tucked into the edge of nowhere. Just hills, heat, and silence. Coming back here felt like peeling a scab that never fully healed. The town hadn't changed. Same narrow roads lined with overgrown hedges, same rusted welcome sign with bullet holes through the O, same houses with chipped paint and curtains always drawn. But now, I wasn't here for nostalgia. I came back because my mother's health took a turn. Early onset dementia, the doctor said. She needed someone. I was the only one left. The house still smells like boiled potatoes and dust. The walls are yellowed with age, and the air inside is heavy, like it's holding its breath. I've been staying in my old room. Same faded wallpaper, same crooked bookshelf. The bed is smaller than I remember, or maybe I've just outgrown more than I thought. It's summer, and the heat sits on you like a wet towel. No breeze, no relief. The nights are the worst, quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat, or something that sounds like it. I'd been back 3 days when I first noticed the itching, just a little spot on my forearm. I scratched it without thinking. Then again, and again. It wasn't a rash, no bump, nothing visible, just the feeling of something moving, like a phantom twitch deep beneath the skin. I told myself it was stress, fatigue, maybe even the heat getting to me. That first night I slept restlessly, tossing and turning with that strange sensation still crawling across my arm. By morning it had faded, but not completely. It's weird, the things you notice when you're alone in an old house. The way the floorboards groan even when no one's walking. The way shadows stretch differently when you're not looking. The way silence starts to sound like whispers when you've been around it long enough. I'm not the paranoid type. I've lived in cities, heard sirens at 3 a.m., walked through alleys most people wouldn't glance at. But this town, it's got a different kind of quiet, a kind that feels like it's listening. And that itch, it's back, deeper this time, like something's burrowing, like something's waiting. The fourth day started like the others, sweaty sheets, a lukewarm cup of instant coffee, and my mother staring blankly out the window from her recliner in the living room. She hadn't spoken much since I arrived. When she did, it was mostly fragmented thoughts, murmured names of people I didn't know, or places I couldn't place. I was halfway through sweeping the kitchen floor when the itch came back. Same spot, left forearm. I set the broom against the wall and sat down, rubbing the skin absently through my t-shirt. It felt deeper, not just a surface itch anymore. I rolled up my sleeve. There was a bump this time, small, maybe the size of a pea, faintly red but no visible bite or irritation. I touched it and immediately yanked my hand away. It felt warm, not hot like a burn. Warm, like something was radiating from beneath. I grabbed a cold washcloth and pressed it against the bump. Sat there for a few minutes watching the condensation drip onto my lap. But the warmth didn't fade. If anything, it seemed to pulse. I tried not to panic. I told myself it was a spider bite, a reaction to something in the attic. Maybe the mattress was infested. The house hadn't been lived in for years, and Lord knows what crawled through these walls at night. I didn't want to overthink it. So, I didn't tell my mother. Not that she would have processed it. I just kept busy. I cooked her something soft she could chew, then took the trash out to the bin behind the house. That's when I noticed something strange. The neighbor across the road, Mrs. Elkins, I think her name was standing at her window. Just standing, staring. Her eyes locked onto me like I was a news broadcast. I waved. She didn't react. I backed away, feeling a weird heat crawl up my neck. When I got back inside, the bump was still there. Same size, still warm, still itching. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I lay still, the sensation returned. Subtle at first, like a feather brushing along my veins, then sharper, like little feet scuttling through my nerves. I turned on the bedside lamp and sat up, sweat pouring down my back. And that's when it happened. I looked down at my arm and saw the bump move. It was slight, barely half an inch, but it slid, like something shifting inside me. My stomach turned. I pressed both thumbs around it, trying to force it still, but it didn't respond. I waited, staring, breathing hard. Nothing. Just a bump again. I told myself it was a muscle spasm, maybe a trapped nerve. I pulled out my phone and searched for symptoms. Everything pointed to stress, dehydration, vitamin deficiency. Not a damn thing about something alive inside you. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it crawling again. Not just in my arm now. It had spread. My shoulder, the back of my neck, maybe even my chest. I kept the light on and sat against the headboard until the sun came up. When I finally stepped out into the kitchen the next morning, my mother looked up for the first time in days. Her cloudy eyes found mine. "You feel it, don't you?" she said. I froze. "What?" I asked, but she just shook her head and looked away. "You feel it, don't you?" Those 6 words looped through my head all day. My mother hadn't said a complete sentence in weeks. And then that, clear as day, like she'd been waiting for the right moment to say it. I asked her again, later that morning, what she meant. She just stared at the wall, her lips trembling slightly, like she was chewing on invisible words. Nothing else came. The bump was still on my arm, but now there were 2. A second one had appeared near my collarbone. Not as warm, but it itched. God, it itched. No matter how much I scratched, there was no relief. I drove into town that afternoon to grab some ointment, maybe Benadryl. The pharmacy was still attached to the hardware store, just like when I was a kid. As I stood in the aisle scanning the shelves, I noticed the cashier watching me. She was a woman around my age, probably someone I went to school with, but I couldn't place her. When I brought my things to the counter, she didn't say hi. She didn't even ask if I had a rewards card. She just said, "You got the itch." I froze. "What did you say?" She scanned the box of antihistamine without looking at it. "You'll burn through that stuff in a day." It doesn't help after a while. What the hell are you talking about? She handed me my bag, leaned forward slightly, and said in a low voice, "You should have stayed gone, Eli." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. I drove back to the house with a white-knuckled grip on the wheel, my thoughts racing. How did she know my name? Why did she say it like that? Was this some backwoods superstition? The itching got worse. I took 2 Benadryl, smeared ointment over every red bump I could find. My arms, my chest, my legs. Nothing helped. It was like trying to put out a wildfire with a damp towel. That night, I couldn't even sit still. My whole body felt like it was hosting an infestation. I kept pacing the bedroom, scratching furiously at my arms and back, until I looked down and saw something that made me stop cold. The bump on my arm, the original one. It moved again, but this time it didn't stop. It crawled a full inch. I watched it slither sideways under my skin like a fish beneath ice. I stumbled backward and nearly knocked over the lamp. My breathing hitched. I pressed both hands against the spot, trying to trap it, but it darted away like it was aware. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the bathroom, grabbed a pair of nail scissors from the drawer, and dragged them lightly across the bump. Just enough to break the skin. A bead of blood welled up, but nothing else came out. No pus, no insect, nothing. Just the itch. That night I didn't sleep again. I couldn't. My skin twitched every few seconds. The bumps, now 6 or 7 of them, moved just beneath the surface, not all at once, not in sync, like they had their own paths, their own minds. I curled up in bed, trembling and sweaty until the sun rose. When I came out of the room, my mother was already in her chair. She didn't greet me, didn't look up. But as I passed behind her, she whispered something I barely caught. "It wants to stay in the blood." I stopped. "What did you say?" I asked, stepping closer. But she just looked at me and smiled, soft, sad, and distant. "I told your father, but he didn't listen either." I didn't leave the house the next day. I barely left my room. My mother's words, "It wants to stay in the blood," played in my head like a chant. The way she said it, it wasn't confusion, it was memory. I sat on the floor of the bathroom with my shirt off, examining every inch of my body. My skin was pale, damp with sweat, and covered in red, raised bumps. Some were the size of dimes now, others smaller. But the worst part wasn't their size. It was the movement. Each one shifted subtly. A ripple here, a twitch there. No pattern, just crawling, like they were feeding off me, living inside me. At one point, I pressed my fingers around one near my ribs, squeezing just enough to feel pressure, and it responded. It squirmed, like it didn't like being cornered. That was when I screamed. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed into the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife we had, and slammed it onto the table. "Just cut it out," I whispered to myself. "Just cut it the fuck out." But I couldn't do it. My hands were shaking too badly. My vision blurred with tears. I stood there for what felt like hours, blade in hand, staring at my reflection in the knife. Eventually, I dropped it. I took a shower instead, scalding hot. I scrubbed until my skin turned red, until it burned more than it itched. I washed 3 times, 4, until my mother banged on the bathroom door and asked if I was okay. I wasn't. Later that afternoon, I caught something out of the corner of my eye while passing by the living room window. A man, across the road, standing completely still on the sidewalk, not doing anything, not walking, just watching the house. I blinked, and he was gone. The next hour, I felt it again. This time, behind my left ear. The itching, the crawling. I ran back to the bathroom, shoved my head under the light, and twisted my neck in the mirror. There was a fresh bump behind my ear, pulsing like a second heartbeat. I screamed again, this time loud enough for the neighbors to hear. That night I took 2 sleeping pills and lay perfectly still. The medicine dulled my panic, but not the sensation. Even in the haze of exhaustion, I could still feel them moving. They were everywhere now. I didn't have to look anymore. I could feel their paths, up my arms, across my chest, along my spine, like veins that didn't belong. I dreamt of roots, long black roots, pushing through my skin and digging into the floor, wrapping around the bed, burrowing into the earth. When I woke up, my pillow was soaked with sweat, and my sheets were stained with blood. Not a lot, just dots, pinpricks, but they were clustered where my legs had been twitching all night. That's when I knew. This wasn't a rash. This wasn't stress. This was happening. Something was living inside me, and it wasn't alone. I woke up with dried blood under my fingernails. I didn't remember scratching, but the damage was there. Raw lines across my chest and shoulders, like I'd tried to claw the creatures out in my sleep. It wasn't just the bumps anymore. The crawling had evolved into pressure, a wriggling, writhing pressure, deep in my muscles, under my ribs, behind my eyes. I couldn't stay in the house. I couldn't sit beside my mother with this thing, or things, moving inside me. So I left. I drove into town, not to the pharmacy this time, to the library. The building was nearly empty. A thin layer of dust coated the shelves, and the lights flickered with the same weak yellow glow I remembered from when I was a kid. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I needed answers. I started in the local history section. Old books, bound in cracked leather, pages yellowed like dead skin. That's where I found it. Tucked between 2 volumes of church records was a thin black journal, handwritten. No author, no title, just the year, 1956. I opened it, and immediately my stomach turned. Sketches, drawings, diagrams of human bodies with tiny black lines under the skin, notes scribbled in the margins. They hatch in the heat. It begins with the itch. The more you scratch, the deeper they burrow. One page had a sketch of a man, eyes wide with terror, arms outstretched. His veins were drawn like spider legs, twisting, splitting, multiplying. Another page said, "The town was built on them. The old ones knew. That's why they left. The ones who stayed were claimed." I slammed the journal shut, my breath catching in my throat. Claimed. I looked around the empty library. Not a soul in sight. Just the hum of the ceiling fan and the faint rustling of paper as I slid the journal back onto the shelf. On the way out, the librarian, a man I didn't recognize, spoke without looking up. "Find what you needed." I paused at the door. "What are they?" I asked. He didn't respond for a long time. Then finally, "They've always been here, but it's worse in the summer." That was all he said. I got in the car and drove home. I wanted to be angry, to scream, but I just felt hollow. Back at the house, my mother was still in her chair. Her eyes followed me like she'd been waiting. "You went looking," she said softly. I didn't answer. She pointed to the floor near the baseboard heater. I walked over, bent down, and saw it. A single black leg, thin, hooked, twitching slightly before it vanished into the shadows. I stumbled backward, hitting the table. My mother didn't flinch. "They never leave, Eli," she whispered. "They only spread." I ran to the bathroom, tore off my shirt. The bumps were larger now. The one behind my ear had moved to my jaw. One on my stomach twitched as I looked at it. Something inside me was getting stronger, bolder. I grabbed the scissors again. I didn't hesitate this time. I jabbed them into the side of the bump on my arm and cut. Blood poured out, too much and fast, but I didn't stop. I dug deeper, skin tearing, breath ragged, until something black and wet squirmed up into view. It slipped between my fingers, hit the floor, crawled away. I collapsed, weak, dizzy, shaking. But the worst part, I looked at my chest and saw another bump starting to rise, then another and another. I wasn't infected, I was a nest. I don't remember blacking out. When I opened my eyes, I was on the bathroom floor. My arm was wrapped in a towel soaked through with blood. The scissors lay beside me, rusted now from red. Outside, the sun was starting to set, amber light pouring through the kitchen window. Hours had passed, maybe the whole day, but the bumps, they were still there. More of them now, bigger. They'd multiplied across my chest, arms, thighs, rising and falling like tiny lungs. Some pulsed, some shifted. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood, cleaned myself up with shaking hands and packed a bag. I was leaving. I didn't care where. I just needed to get out of Pine Hollow. I ran to the car. My mother watched from the window, unmoving. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't say goodbye. Just that same faint, knowing smile. As if this had all happened before. The car started on the first try. I tore out of the driveway and down the narrow roads, gravel spitting under the tires. 10 minutes out, I passed the same rusted water tower I used to climb as a kid. Another 10 minutes, and the trees got denser. The road felt narrower. I drove faster, but something was wrong. The bumps on my legs started to burn, throb, like they were panicking. I felt a stabbing pain in my gut, like someone had hooked a fish hook into my intestines and yanked. I swerved, nearly clipped a ditch, and slammed on the brakes. Sweat poured from my face. My fingers went numb. My heart pounded so fast it felt like it would explode. And then, a voice, not out loud, inside me, like someone whispering from my bones. "Go back." I gripped the wheel tighter. "Go back." My foot refused to press the gas. My eyes blurred. I looked in the mirror. No mirror. Not again, but the rear view, just for a second. I saw someone sitting in the back seat. No features, just a long black silhouette, crawling with twitching legs beneath the skin. I slammed the car into reverse, spun it around and headed back toward the house. I didn't even think. My body moved on its own. The town had its claws in me. By the time I stumbled back through the front door, my mother was still in her chair. She looked at me like she expected me to return, like she knew I couldn't leave. "They always come back," she said. "The ones marked by summer, the ones with the itch." I dropped the bag, collapsed to my knees. I pulled up my shirt. There were dozens of them now, all crawling beneath my skin. One on my side suddenly bulged, hard. I screamed, grabbing at it, clawing, digging. My fingers found something solid, something sharp, something that moved with me. I pulled, and it came part way out. A leg, black, hooked, wet. I saw it, felt it, I smelled it, and then it disappeared. Not out into the world, but back into me, retreating, like it had changed its mind, like it wasn't ready yet. I collapsed, gasping. My head spun, my vision dimmed. The bumps still moved, but I didn't fight them anymore. I couldn't. I stopped counting the days. Time slipped into a haze of fever and crawling. I couldn't tell what hour it was anymore. The sun rose and fell, but I barely saw it. I kept the blinds closed. The light made the movement worse. The bumps never stopped growing. Some pulsed slowly, like hearts of their own. Others twitched without rhythm, without reason. When I touched them, they responded, pulling back, shifting, pressing deeper. I wasn't sleeping anymore, not really. I'd drift for minutes at a time, only to wake up gasping, clawing at my own skin, feeling the burrowing happening in real time. One night I woke to find blood on my pillow again. I sat up and felt something wet slide down my cheek. A thin black leg. It retreated before I could scream. I didn't chase it. I just sat there, shaking. The house smelled like copper and mildew. My mother hadn't spoken in days. She just stared at me with that same look. Sad, but resigned. Like she'd watched someone else go through this once. Maybe my father. Maybe herself. I began to hear sounds inside the walls. Not the usual creaks and groans of an old house. No. These were skittering. Light taps. Tiny claws dragging across wood. Sometimes they came from behind the vents. Sometimes from under the floorboards. But the worst was when I realized they were coming from inside me too. I could hear them in my ears, behind my eyes, inside my teeth. Every bone in my body felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. My skin pulsed with foreign life. My mouth tasted like metal and rot. I tried to scream once, really scream, but nothing came out, only a sharp pain in my throat, like something was nesting just beneath my vocal cords. I stood in front of the hallway mirror once, just to see, just to prove to myself that I was still me, but I couldn't look for long. My reflection moved just a second slower than I did. I don't know how much time passed, but tonight, something changed. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, deep, twisting, not like the usual crawling. This was stronger, more deliberate. I lifted my shirt. One of the larger bumps, just above my navel, had grown to the size of a fist, and it was moving, not twitching, shifting, stretching the skin like a balloon. Then it pressed. From inside, something pushed outward, and I saw the shape. A long, jagged leg, then another. The skin stretched to its limit. I dropped to the floor, clutching my stomach, biting my lip until blood spilled from my mouth. And then, population. The skin split, just slightly, and from the opening, something emerged. It wasn't a spider, not exactly. It had legs like one, thin, black, hooked, but the body was long, wet, segmented, wrong. It squirmed into the open air for a moment, then stopped, like it was waiting. I didn't move. I couldn't. And then it turned, not toward the floor, not toward the door, but back toward me. It crawled back into the wound, disappeared beneath the skin like a swimmer diving beneath the surface. The wound sealed. The bumps started moving again. All of them, all at once. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, breathing shallow, and that's when I knew. It was never just one. They were multiplying inside me. Every hour, every breath. I can feel them now. Nesting, growing, stretching toward the bone. They're not going to stop. And one day, they'll need to leave.